Gaza Famine Alert. Global Hunger Monitor warns of looming crisis amid Israel-Palestine conflict. Imagine a scenario where starvation becomes so severe that it earns the dreaded label of famine. This is not a distant dystopia, but a looming reality in Gaza, according to a recent warning from a Global Hunger Monitor. Immediate action is needed to prevent mass death. But here's where it gets controversial. Despite claims from Israel about aid deliveries and efforts to ease the crisis, evidence suggests that widespread hunger, malnutrition, and disease are spiraling out of control. Can this dire situation be resolved before it's too late? And who should bear responsibility for averting catastrophe? The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, IPC, a system that monitors food security worldwide, has raised alarms about the possibility of famine being formally declared in Gaza. This designation would mean that the situation has reached catastrophic levels, one where at least 20% of the population experiences extreme food shortages, 1/3 of children suffer acute malnutrition, and 2 people per 10,000 die daily due to starvation or related illnesses. The IPC warns that most of Gaza is already teetering on the edge of these thresholds, with mounting reports of deaths linked to hunger. To understand the gravity of the issue, consider this. Gaza's health authorities have now recorded over 60,000 Palestinians killed since the conflict escalated nearly 2 years ago. Among the heartbreaking statistics are 147 individuals, 88 of them children, who have died specifically from hunger-related causes. These numbers paint a grim picture of what life looks like under such conditions. He vowed to establish new food centers to address the problem. But why does the crisis persist? Israel insists it is not intentionally starving Gazans. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar described the situation as undeniably tough, but accused critics of spreading falsehoods about deliberate starvation tactics. Yet, humanitarian organizations counter that access to sufficient aid remains blocked. For instance, Ross Smith, a senior advisor at the World Food Programme (WFP), revealed that only half of requested aid supplies are entering Gaza during Israel's recent humanitarian pauses, a measure introduced ostensibly to facilitate relief delivery. This brings us to another contentious point: conflicting narratives about aid distribution. While Israel claims 5,000 aid trucks have entered Gaza over the past 2 months, the WFP emphasizes that logistical hurdles and insufficient permissions hinder their ability to meet the immense needs on the ground. Moreover, rival initiatives, like those led by the newly formed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF, backed by both Israel and the United States, have drawn criticism. According to the IPC, many GHF-provided food items require water and fuel to prepare, resources that are scarce in Gaza. Critics argue that such aid packages could inadvertently worsen the crisis rather than alleviate it. As if the humanitarian toll wasn't devastating enough, the ongoing violence continues to claim lives. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes reportedly killed 55 Palestinians, including women and children, waiting for aid along Salahuddin Road. Such incidents add fuel to the fire of accusations flying between all parties involved. Hamas denies allegations of stealing aid, while Israel accuses the group of obstructing its proper distribution. Meanwhile, the United Nations maintains it hasn't seen substantial proof of large-scale diversion of aid by Hamas. With no end to the fighting in sight, the stakes couldn't be higher. Talks aimed at securing a ceasefire and freeing hostages collapsed last week, leaving tensions simmering. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated his commitment to continuing military operations until Hamas's capabilities are dismantled and hostages are released. But as the world watches, one can't help but wonder, is there truly no room for compromise? Could international pressure sway either side toward de-escalation? What do you think? Should Israel face greater accountability for allowing aid into Gaza? Or does Hamas share equal blame for exacerbating the suffering? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Israel's humanitarian crisis. Starvation in Gaza. In the face of mounting international pressure, Israel is being called upon to address what some are describing as barbaric actions in Gaza. With reports surfacing that more people are dying from starvation, a chilling question arises. How can humanity stand by while such suffering unfolds? But here's where it gets controversial. Are we truly doing enough to hold those responsible accountable? Amid escalating tensions, Israeli forces have been accused of killing dozens of desperate individuals who were merely seeking aid. These tragic incidents occurred during chaotic scenes at food distribution sites, where gunfire added terror to an already dire situation. The haunting images of hungry Palestinians scrambling for supplies under the threat of violence paint a stark picture of life on the brink. The United Nations has issued urgent warnings about the severity of the crisis, stating that insufficient amounts of food are entering Gaza to prevent widespread starvation. This revelation raises critical questions about access and responsibility. Who bears the ultimate burden for ensuring aid reaches those in need, especially when blockades or restrictions hinder delivery efforts? This heartbreaking scenario underscores a larger issue: the intersection of conflict and humanitarian crises. When war disrupts supply chains and leaves civilians trapped without basic necessities like food, water, and medical care, the human cost becomes unbearable. And this is the part most people miss. While headlines often focus on military strategies or political disputes, the everyday struggles of ordinary people caught in the crossfire rarely receive the same attention. To make matters worse, videos capturing these harrowing moments, such as one showing chaos erupting at an aid drop site, serve as grim reminders of the desperation gripping the region. In just over a minute, viewers witness both the fragility of human resilience and the devastating consequences of prolonged conflict. As global citizens, we must ask ourselves, what role do we play in advocating for change? Is it enough to rely solely on organizations like the UN to intervene, or should nations take stronger diplomatic action? Furthermore, how do we reconcile differing perspectives on accountability when emotions run high and historical grievances complicate solutions? These are not easy questions to answer, but they demand our attention. Do you believe the current response to the crisis is sufficient? Or do you think there's more that could and should be done? Join the conversation in the comments below and share your thoughts on how we can work toward a future where no one has to endure such unimaginable hardship. Starving Gaza, a generation's hunger crisis. Hunger in Gaza isn't just a present crisis, it's a ticking time bomb that threatens generations to come. The alarming scenes in Gaza City, where hundreds of Palestinians wait hours in searing heat just to receive precious food aid, highlight a humanitarian emergency of epic proportions. But here's where it gets even more unsettling. The damage could haunt families for years, possibly altering the health of descendants who haven't even been born yet. Let's break it down. Today, a staggering 1/3 of Gaza's 2.1 million people have endured several days, sometimes longer, without eating at all. Even more shocking, about a quarter of the population is now living in conditions that the United Nations World Food Programme describes as famine-like. Ross Smith, who leads emergency operations for the agency, recently described the skyrocketing hunger in Gaza as a desperate and rapidly worsening catastrophe. Under mounting global scrutiny, the Israeli military announced it will briefly halt military operations for 10 hours each day in parts of Gaza, supposedly to let more food and medicine reach those in need. Yet, nearly 100,000 women and children in Gaza are already battling the worst form of malnutrition, according to Smith. Clinics run by Doctors Without Borders have seen more than 700 pregnant and breastfeeding women come in for urgent hunger-related care just this month. What most people don't realize is that hunger isn't only about missing meals, its impact burrows deep, with some effects lasting well beyond recovery and even spanning generations. Experts agree that chronic food shortages are especially perilous for young children and babies still developing in the womb. The UN World Food Programme warns that malnutrition can disrupt not only childhood development, but could potentially trigger changes in how genes work, possibly affecting the physical and mental health of a person's children and grandchildren. Marco Kerak, a professor who studies malnutrition's impacts at the London School of Hygiene Tropical Medicine, explained it simply. It's a lifelong saga, and it doesn't end with one person. The consequences can cross generational lines. Think about that. A child suffering today could have health ripples felt decades later by people who don't even exist yet. Does that surprise you? How did the crisis reach this point? Food insecurity in Gaza has been a worry since the conflict with Israel and Hamas exploded in October 2023. At the same time, attacks on Gaza resumed, and the threat of widespread starvation loomed larger. In May, after international outcry, Israel eased the blockade slightly. Yet this change introduced a new dynamic. Instead of hundreds of aid distribution points overseen by the UN, food assistance is now mostly funneled through just 4 sites, run by the newly formed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF. This switch, meant to address concerns that Hamas had been intercepting aid, has created new challenges. Crowds gathering at the GHF sites have faced gunfire, stampedes, even theft from masked gangs. According to the UN, nearly 700 people have lost their lives near these distribution points since July, turning the quest for bread into a daily life-or-death gamble. Here's the controversial part. Israeli officials have pushed back against the idea that full-blown famine exists in Gaza, challenging reports of mass starvation. But Gaza's Ministry of Health says otherwise, reporting over 130 deaths from starvation since the beginning of war, with more than half of those fatalities happening just this summer. NPR wasn't able to independently verify these numbers, but the mounting tragedy is hard to ignore. Children are especially at risk. When a developing body is deprived of food, it starts breaking down its own fat, muscle, and tissue just to survive. For children, who have less fat and smaller bodies, this process quickly becomes life-threatening. Severe early malnutrition can permanently stunt a child's physical and cognitive growth, and raise the risk of chronic diseases later in life, such as diabetes or heart problems. It's like asking a car's engine, meant for a small sedan, to power a heavy truck. It just won't last. The challenges don't stop there. In Gaza, disruptions from violence, lack of education, and forced displacement only compound the developmental hurdles children face. Zane Swanson, an expert on global food and water security, notes that this creates a vicious cycle. Poverty and hunger breed more malnutrition, which then stifles a community's growth and deepens the poverty trap. Isn't any wonder that breaking this cycle feels so daunting? What's truly remarkable, and a bit unsettling, is that the trauma of hunger can imprint itself at the cellular level. Scientists point to events like the Dutch hunger winter during World War II, where people exposed to famine in the womb were later found at greater risk for obesity, diabetes, and shorter lives. Even their grandchildren, who were never exposed to the famine itself, showed signs of inherited damage. San Khatib, a genetics professor, puts it this way: we inherit the memory of trauma on a molecular basis. This emerging science, called epigenetics, studies how hardship can leave biological tags on our DNA, changing which genes express themselves, even without changing the DNA code itself. Although research is still ongoing and the mechanisms are complex, the evidence is growing that these changes can be passed across generations. But there's debate over how much other factors, like poverty or existing health conditions, contribute to these outcomes. What if we're underestimating the long reach of trauma? But here's the part most people miss. Recovery is possible, and there is hope. Experts like Kerak stress that swift, targeted intervention can help children recover much of their lost potential, both mentally and physically. Simply feeding children isn't enough. Holistic, ongoing care and support, addressing both body and mind, are critical. And while some epigenetic changes may be lasting, Khatib, and how do you feel about the idea that an entire generation's health maybe even the next ones, is being shaped right now by the decisions made in today's headlines? We invite you to share your thoughts and keep this important conversation going below.